Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
Hey, welcome back to In a Nutshell. Today I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a long time when we started these podcasts. You can't imagine how many articles and subscriptions that I read over a year's time, and how many of them are really good information and can really help farmers, and how many of them are misguided and don't really tell the whole tale of what somebody is going to really need fertility-wise if he hasn't considered many things. I think all of them are intended to be helpful to other people and give them direction to a better place to go to grow good quality, nutritious crops of any kind, fruits, vegetables, nut crops, etc. I don't think their education or their experience lends themselves to understand the things that they're telling people that won't work. We get a blanket approach most of the times, shows these people, or these people want to express that this should work everywhere. This will work everywhere for you. You're doing it the wrong way because you're either working with commercial fertilizers, or you're using too many ag chemicals, or the soil is dead and you're not working enough on vermiculture and getting worm castings and worm activity or the biological activity, and these are the things you need to do. And I've always liked to tell my growers that I've consulted with over the years, when you read through all of this stuff, there comes a time where you just have to farm. And so sometimes that means what you're trying to tell somebody to do is not really able to be done given the parameters of what they are dealing with. A good example, if you're out here and you have a quarter of an acre dedicated to vegetables in your backyard, you can do a lot of things there that you can't do if I'm farming 1,000 acres of vegetables and I have 50 different crops growing at any one time of the year, and I'm turning those crops over 3 times a year. That's a totally different type of farming. So I don't want to get off on a rant, but probably I'm going to get off on a rant today. And I read some stuff recently, and one of the hot topics that you read when you read these articles, and I read a lot of periodicals, one on vegetable crops, some on wine grapes, consulting magazines, a lot of things on nut crops, and other crops that are grown. But the big thing that we're hearing now is healthy soil, as if nobody really wants healthy soil. And I think we all want healthy soil, but the definition has never been really defined very well as to what it is. And some people's definition of it's a organic, sustainable, it's regenerative, it incorporates biodynamics, it does many things, okay? But it means something different to everybody. To me, you have to consider the environmental aspects that you will face where you are in your particular situation and what you expect to see from environmental forces, the weather, the kind of rain, what kind of water that you have available. Is it cold? Is it hot? Here where I live in around Modesto in the middle of the Central Valley, you don't see banana trees for a reason, because it really is a crop out of place. And so when you do that, and then you want to say, well, you just need to do this. I said, be very wary. This is my warning to you. Be very wary when you listen to somebody's or read somebody's article and they say, this is really all you need to do, because that means you're not going to get enough information to make the best decision. A good thing to understand, not to pick on this, but when I've heard a lot of people that are wine grape growers, one of the things they want is they like a devigored vine, one that's not hugely vegetative, one with small crops, a lot of times thinned, and most times thinned to a level of crop that is less than the capability of the plant, devigorate to put more character. And when I say character, it isn't a quality issue, it's a flavor issue. It's all of those inherent things that come from that soil and that vine that give you the ability in the hands of a great winemaker to make a spectacular. Okay, so when you say that and you say what you need to do, I'll see one, I've seen a lot here, and I've seen other people with organics saying the same thing, is that, you know, everybody's worried about weeds and they sap nutrients as well as hurt you for trying to get your crop harvested. Depending on what crop that is, they get in the way. They grow as high as they can grow. They sap more water. They're really wasting nutrients and pulling it away from your crop. So one of the new thing I've seen in a lot of people, particularly those that are looking at regenerative or organics, they're putting out livestock like sheep into their orchard or into their vineyard to eat a lot of times they'll plant cover crops and they'll eat on those cover crops, but they'll also eat on those weeds, and they basically will defecate right back into to where the crop is grown. And that's fine because, you know, we're picking those harvest is up off the ground, and that manure is on the floor, which really doesn't interfere, and it breaks down and gets turned back into the soil. And everybody thinks, you know, they eat it and then they return it all back to the soil. The thing that happens is everybody thinks that that's a total regenerative process. They take it in, they give it back. The problem is whatever gain they take and however much bigger they get, or how much, if they're sheep, how much wool they grow, those are grown from nutrients that came from that soil when they were eating there, and those are removed. So it isn't 100% regen of all of those going back into the soil, you know. And so we're going to talk a little bit about nitrogen in legumes because it's one of the really things I think a lot of people can really benefit from, but it isn't the only thing that you need to do. So when you do that, but I want you to think about this, what about crops that are harvested on the floor of the orchard or the vineyard, where we used to put, you know, and there's more of this being done on the vine drying of raisins, but we used to lay them down on the ground. I don't think everybody would think that's attractive to see a lot of sheep or goat pellets all across right where the raisins are laying and where you have to spin. It just opens up an avenue that's not the best. And then some people say, well, we till them under. Well, then you break all of that good biological network that's already been built up. So everything you step, it depends on what you're doing. That's why I say it's not a one-size-fits-all. If you're picking up nut crops, one of the things you're doing, a lot of the equipment we currently have sweeps them into a windrow to be picked up. Well, it's going to sweep everything on that floor. Not another good place to have, you know, sheep or goats out there actually doing it. There also is a machinery that's getting there to the point that they are above ground harvesting. Okay, maybe this makes more sense down the road, but we're not quite there yet. The other thing we find out is that if you live in a hot, dry climate, like I do here in Modesto, and you work on lighter or sandy soils, I see a lot of things that says, well, we're going to build up organic matter and we're going to build up soil humus and we're going to do this and this is going to be good for the plants and we're basically going to get this nutrients out every year after year after year. And they're right, except in the Central Valley here or any place where you have hot, dry periods of time and you have sandy soils that don't have a lot of capability, holding capacity, you have a very difficult time building up soil humus. Even though you're putting out plenty of carbon material, the heat of the sun on that hot sandy soil, which is like, anybody ever went to the beach and they walk on the sand before they get to actually the water, how hot that sand can get. It retains that heat. What it does is it oxidizes that carbon material and you don't really have it there to build back up into the soil. And so it doesn't work. But if you get to coastal climates or you get into really mountainous areas where it's cool at night, a lot cooler during the day, heavier soils, you have a much better chance of building soil humus. And why is that important? Well, if you do a soil test and you find that you have a 5% soil humus or organic matter, as it'll say on your soil test. That soil, whether you do anything or not, is going to release 100 pounds. And if you've got legumes out there planted in a cover crop, they're going to pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into their roots and increase some more nitrogen. So if you have a low use type of crop for nitrogen, well, that could be things like vegetables. Could be things like wine grapes. If you're trying to devigor them, you don't want them to be very vegetative, so you don't want a lot of nitrogen. So you get that amount up. I've had wine grape growers where they're doing a lot of cover crop work and their soil humus is getting built up really well, and all of a sudden they can't slow down their vines. And so what they do is they start to cut back water to slow them down. Well, then they lose some of the character that they really want long term. So you just have to understand not just one piece of the system, but the whole system. In addition to that, everything starts with the soil. When you're talking about regenerative ag, it all begins with where's my soil and how do I know what's there? So I need to do what I've always said through most of my podcasts is you have to start with a soil audit. You have to know what's there. You can't fix, adjust, or improve if you don't know what you have there. You just can't start throwing things at it. There's two things, two laws that we go by a lot, and I don't know if you've heard them, but there's the law of the minimum, which means the nutrient that's in the lowest supply or most efficient will be where your yield potential will be stopped. And then there's the law of the maximum. That nutrient that's in the greatest excess will limit your production until you get it back. And so you have to look on both sides. So if I don't know what's in the soil and I say, well, I have to put on this compost or I have to put all this back in regenerative area, and it is applying things that are already in surplus, you're just hurting yourself. We see this a lot in phosphates. And once you get phosphates up, it's a real difficult thing to adjust because they have to be grown out. The plant basically literally does recycle them. They need to be in high volumes in the soil for the soil to be able to run into and harvest that phosphate. But at the same time, when they get too high, they begin to block out other nutrients. And because they block out other nutrients, that law of the maximum takes over, and they are punishing. A good one would be phosphate and zinc. They're synergistic. So if you put on too much zinc and don't have enough phosphate, you block out phosphate. If you put on too much phosphate, it'll block out the zinc and you won't have enough zinc. And so all of these things play in. It's a balance. Always comes back to balancing the nutrients. There is, in my earlier podcast, I talked a lot about where things needed to be. And I may go back through that one again at some point. It's really important to understand where calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, all the nutrients, all the micronutrients are, so that you know where they need to be. If you don't have a target, where do you shoot? That's the same thing. Go to a shooting range. If there's no target, where are you aiming at? And that's what soil science is about, is finding out where those numbers are, aiming at them, and understanding how much it takes to get to the maximum level of it. So we always start with a soil test. And the first thing, and I've spoke to many, many groups, and I always ask them a lot of times, okay, you're looking at your first soil test here. What's the most important thing on that soil test? And a lot of people say, well, it's organic matter, or it's the amount of phosphorus. And some will say, oh, no, it's the potassium. No, what it is the cation exchange capacity or total exchange capacity. Because it then tells you what is the nutrient holding capacity of my soil. Before I get into what is in there or not, I need to know, do I have a light sandy soil? Do I have a heavy clay soil? And a lot of articles I read are like working in a vacuum. They're using their soil and everybody's got that soil. And that's not the case. Same way with climate. Well, I'm working with this soil and this climate, and everybody has that soil and climate. It's like I say, we don't grow bananas here, not a lot of mangoes that I've ever seen here. They don't grow. They need to be in a tropical climate. In this valley, it gets cold in the wintertime. Any frost, crops that are dangerous to frost don't do well here. We don't see avocados in the valley. We might see a tree in somebody's backyard, but commercial groves don't grow here. So I think it's important to always understand, once you know what my soil is like, what am I missing, how can I add it, where's the perfect number to get to, and work towards that. Then I want to reduce the amount, if I want to reduce the amount of commercial nitrogen or phosphate or potassium, what sources do I have to utilize to do that? You know, if you're going out and buying, straw or something to put into your compost, probably unless you grew that yourself and it's not an organic source, if you're just buying straw to put into your compost, well, probably was grown with commercial nitrogen, commercial phosphate, potash, and micronutrients. So if you're really wanting to go organic, sustainable, regenerative, biodynamics, all this, then you have to put all this together. And one of the things that I always tell people, we don't have enough food in the world anyway. So I think it's important that we go and are working towards a sustainable, healthy soil that can be regenerative. And when we do, what we find is we can reduce pesticides. We have less need for the same amount of nitrogen we've been applying. And then we're beginning to get closer and closer to what I think the general population wants, is as pesticide-free a food as we can get, grown sustainably so we can keep growing it that way, and finally, one that's nutritious and nutrient dense. The one last thing I'd like to say is that I see a lot of people that also, when they're talking about organics, one of the downsides of organics, and it really is, you can grow tremendous crops doing it organic, is when you have a crop that is a very, very high demand for nitrogen type of crop. I grow one here myself, and a lot of people in the valley here in California grow almonds. And the amount of energy it needs from, we'll just say, the middle of February until the end of April is phenomenal. And even if you have maximum amount of soil humus, organic matter, it just can't get it out fast. And so what you have is you don't get as much in. It doesn't support nearly as big a crop. A lot of it will be pinched off and dropped onto the floor, and it'll balance out the amount of nutrients you have with the crop it holds onto the tree. When you think about that, then you're going to have reduced yield, and you'll still have your organic type of crop, but it won't have the same volume. And we need more food in this world, not less. So anything that strikes too hard at the total volume that we can produce, but just producing volume doesn't do you any good if it's not nutrient dense. So it's important that we balance those nutrients. And I don't want to get too far off topic, but as I see these articles in the future, I want to point out good information, but here's where I think they need to be adjusted for your situation. I want you to, when you read an article like that, if you've listened to this, okay, he's talking about, well, what should I do? Well, I should put my soil sample and my exchange into that. I should look at my environment. Am I high rainfall, low rainfall? Do I have freezing temperatures, not freezing temperatures? Do I have the ability to harvest above ground so I don't worry about animal waste on the floor of the? You just put all of your circumstances and say, that's great, but it doesn't work for me. Maybe I can incorporate some of these, but maybe not all of them. So hopefully as you see articles and as you read articles, if you don't really understand why something should work that way, our mailbag is always open, looking for more mail all the time. So until next time, looking forward to talking to you, and look for my next one.
Thank you for another very, very intriguing episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure everyone very much so enjoyed your insight as to how to address agricultural literatures and cross-reference them to your own specific circumstances to see if maybe some of the things that they're talking about does or doesn't work for you. For all of the listeners out there, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and always stay curious.